Can you ever imagine several hundred thousands of people who live in a busy city area, having a marketplace, housing, and communication with neighboring people, just disappear? No, you can't. How can that be? People can abandon places due to a number of reasons, but just vanishing? Sounds absurd. But it can happen, and it has happened, to many civilizations before us. Here are only some of many civilizations that suddenly vanished. Number 10. Anasazi. The original inhabitants of the area of today's southeastern Utah, northeastern Arizona, northwestern New Mexico, and southwestern Colorado were the Anasazi. The center of the Anasazi civilization was located in the Chaco Canyon in today's New Mexico, and you might be familiar with the descendants of the Anasazi people, known by the name Pueblo, but the history of their ancestors has been long lost. The Spanish gave them and also other indigenous Americans the name of Pueblo because of the large villages in their societies. People today still live in these areas and follow a few of the traditions of their ancestors that have remained, like pottery and craftswork. During the high period of the Anasazi civilization, the number of villages reached up to around 80, but only about 25 remain. The high period of Anasazi civilization occurred around 1050 to 1300, but the Anasazi civilization can be said to have begun as early as around 700. Anasazi villages had houses built of stone, and often included both a below-ground and above-ground level. These houses were of very high quality and size. Many consisted of 2, 3, or 4 stories, and offered apartment-style living, with 20 to as many as 1,000 rooms in a single building. Often these houses were built under overhanging cliffs. They were known for their basket-weaving skills in their early days, but as the civilization prospered, the people started using fine pottery, which still remains today. Initially, the Anasazi people lived a semi-nomadic life. Later, they started to occupy themselves in agriculture and cultivated maize and pumpkin, weaved cloth from cotton and yucca fiber, and also domesticated turkeys. The Anasazi civilization was truly flourishing, and it is hard to say why the people had abandoned all housing and property during the 13th century. Archaeologists say it may have been due to the drought between 1276 and 1299, which led to the Anasazi people to find new settlements. But new villages that were found in neighboring areas had differences in the architectural layout of the houses than that of the Anasazi. There are certain tribes today which may be direct descendants of the Anasazi people, but what happened to the Anasazi have led to only unanswered questions. Number 9. Cahokia. This civilization was first established around 600 CE, and the Cahokia were a unique indigenous people who were best known for having made large, man-made earthen structures. What makes Cahokia so intriguing is how little we know about it. Cahokia was a civilization of about 50 communities spreading over 2,200 acres. At its peak from 1100 to 1200 CE, the city covered nearly 6 square miles and had a population of as many as 100,000 people. Located in southern Illinois, it was possibly the largest North American city of its time. These ancient Indians built more than 120 earthen mounds, 109 of which have been recorded and 68 of which are preserved, and perhaps there were more that have been destroyed over time. While some of these structures are just few feet above the ground, don't mistake the skills of these indigenous people. Others reach 100 feet into the sky. These mounds were made entirely of earth, and they were constructed most likely by transporting the soil in baskets to the construction site. Imagine how difficult that probably was. And it is estimated that more than 50 million cubic feet of earth was moved for the construction of the mounds, leaving large depressions called burrow pits, which can still be seen in the area today. Although the Cahokia were advanced considering the rest of the Native American people, they did not leave written records, and from what has been found, only symbols on pottery, stone, and wood remain. Around 1200, there was a flood and the city began to decline, and then around 1400 it became totally abandoned. Much of the city lies buried under 19th and 20th century developments. The remnants of the Cahokias have been preserved and made into a historical site. Historians simply can't say how this civilization came to an end. And how could a civilization that prospered for more than about 800 years just come to an abrupt end? Some hypothesize that it may be due to overhunting, deforestation, invasion, or disease, but the truth is that we don't know. Number 8. Olmec. The Olmec were the first of many major civilizations in ancient Mexico that prospered in 1200 to 400. In the Aztec language, Olmec means the rubber people. The Olmec were probably the first people to figure out how to process latex of rubber trees into something that can be shaped, cured, and hardened. The Olmecs are considered to come before other Mesoamerican cultures and have much influence on them, including the Maya and Aztecs. The Olmecs were a wealthy people, and it was due to the fact that they were highly successful in trading and farming. The environment they lived in may be compared to that of the Nile, Indus, and Yellow River valleys and Mesopotamia. They were able to grow crops such as corn and beans. They also gathered the plentiful local supply of plant food, palm nuts, and sea life. Typical Olmec trade goods included obsidian, jade, serpentine, mica, rubber, pottery, feathers, and polished mirrors of ilmenite and magnetite. The most outstanding legacy of the Olmec civilization are the colossal stone heads they made. They were carved in basalt and were possibly portraits of their rulers. The Olmec population dropped suddenly between 400 and 350, and it is not known with any clarity what caused the eventual extinction of the Olmec culture. Archaeologists have guessed that the depopulation was caused by environmental changes, specifically the water supply shortage, due to the silting of the rivers. Another theory for the considerable population drop led to the conclusion of increased volcanic activity, which may have covered lands with ash and forced the Olmec to move their settlements. But once again, many questions remain unanswered. Number 7. The Nabateans. The Nabateans were considered as a highly developed culture as they had not only been able to endure the harsh climate of the region they lived in, but also to thrive in it. Their capital city was the legendary Petra, Jordan's most famous tourist attraction. The Nabateans were Arabian nomads from the Negev desert, who acquired wealth as traders on the incense routes. The Nabateans were skilled traders, trading their goods to as far as China, India, the Far East, Egypt, Syria, Greece, and Rome. Nabateans traded goods such as spice, incense, gold, animals, iron, copper, sugar, medicines, ivory, perfumes, and fabric. It is thought that they were able to become so successful through their control of water along the routes. While other Arabian tribes had much difficulty arranging water, the Nabateans dug cisterns which filled with rainwater, and then covered them and marked them with signs that they would only understand. The control of the trade route between the areas of Jordan, the Red Sea, Damascus, and southern Arabia made them very powerful and influential. But soon enough, this civilization also came to an end, and it is theorized that the cities were destroyed by earthquakes. And by the time of the Arab invasion in the 7th century, the cities had been long deserted. Although the Nabateans were highly successful people, no one is really sure how large their empire really was, or how they came to an end. Number 6. The Minoan civilization flourished in the Middle Bronze Age on the island of Crete from 2000 to 1500. Minoan settlements have been found all over Crete and are described to may have been places of local administration, trade, religious and political centers. Minoan civilization was known for its great cities and palaces. It extended trade throughout the Levant and beyond. They were also known for their use of writing and sophisticated artwork, including elaborate seals and pottery. But with all the wealth and power, where did these people go? Theories suggest that they were destroyed by a volcanic eruption in the Santorini Islands near Crete, which must have ravaged the coast of Crete with waves, ash, raining stone, and more. Herodotus, the famous Greek historian, writes that they were brought down by plagues and disease. But Herodotus wrote many centuries after these people had vanished. Some even say invaders overtook the Minoan government and took control of the island. Even though this civilization had an abrupt ending, the influence of the Minoans survived and later continued on in the Mycenaean civilization. Number 5. Mycenaeans. The Mycenaeans were the first people to speak the Greek language. Their civilization flourished between 1650 and 1200. The Mycenaeans were influenced by the earlier Minoan civilization located on the island of Crete. Mycenaean Greece was a society of warriors and had highly developed political, social, and economic systems. The Mycenaeans had a prosperous rule over the Greek mainland and areas around the Aegean Sea. They were an elite community and lived in comfort and style. They had skilled workers and craftsmen who were known to produce utilitarian and luxury goods, including weapons and tools, jewelry, carved gems, glass ornaments, and vases, which were most likely used to transport oil, wine, and other commodities for trade. During the Bronze Age collapse around 1200, the Mycenaean civilization came to an end, and after that came the so-called Dark Ages. It was previously believed that the Minoan civilization on Crete may have been wiped out due to massive earthquakes and ash resulting from volcanic eruptions, and the end of the Mycenaeans may have been for the same reasons, but others also assume that they may have been invaded. Number 4. Rapa Nui. Much can be said about the Rapa Nui or Easter Island, and many are familiar with the 900 giant stone statues that have been found in diverse locations around the island. In 1722, Dutch explorers landed on the island, and in honor of the day they had landed, they gave the name Easter Island, but it was known as Rapa Nui to its earliest inhabitants. The first human inhabitants of Rapa Nui are believed to have arrived as immigrants around 300 to 400. The late period of the island civilization was described by civil wars and general destruction. Many of the statues having been ruined, and obsidian spear points and weapons have been found dating to that period. Island traditions say that around 1680 war had broke out between two of the island's ethnic groups, so-called Short Ears and Long Ears. The Short Ears rebelled against the Long Ears, which resulted in the death of many of the Rapa Nui people by burning them. But there was no real evidence of a population decline before the Europeans first discovered the island in 1722. And during the 19th century South American slave raids, the native population was down to half. By 1877, the Rapa Nui were estimated to around only 111. Additionally, the European traders exposed the natives to disease, destroyed much of their property, and enforced migration, which led to further decrease in the remaining populations. But these are only two of the many hypotheses that have been made to figure out what happened to the Rapa Nui. Some historians also say that the Rapa Nui died out of starvation from overusage of resources, and others also say the downfall of the civilization was due to volcanic eruption. Bottom line is that what happened to the Rapa Nui is a total mystery. Number 3. The Nabta Playa. Known to the world to have left behind the oldest known astronomical alignments of megaliths in the world, the Nabta Playa, an advanced urban community that arose approximately 11,000 years ago. The first settlements of people in Nabta Playa arrived between 11,000 to 9,300 years ago. Some archaeologists believe that the people of Nabta Playa were the ancestral civilization for the first Nile cities that arose in Egypt thousands of years later. The climate of the Nabta Playa basin was very unpredictable, having seasonal shifts where some parts of the year there would be an abundance of water and other parts of the year there would be drought. Nabta Playa is an amazing site composed of hundreds of prehistoric tumuli, stelae, and megalithic structures located in the Nubian desert. Archaeological excavations at Nabta Playa have found that human occupation coincided with the major megastones and the majority of other artifacts at the same time, of around 6,000 years ago. There is also good archaeological evidence of earlier habitation. A few ceramic artifacts have been preserved and are considered to be some of the oldest ever identified on the whole African continent. The Nabta Playa were forced to migrate to a more habitable area when there was another climatic change and drought returned to the area. But the question still remains: where did the civilization of megalith builders go? Number 2. Angkor, the Khmer Empire. The city of Angkor was the royal center of Khmer kings who ruled one of the largest and most prosperous kingdoms in the history between 800 to 1300 CE. Angkor Wat, an ancient temple, is known as the world's largest religious complex, covering 200 hectares. Around 1122, the king Suryavarman II started its construction, and it took about 30 years to complete. The Khmer society was a multicultural blend of Pali and Sanskrit, who followed a mixture of Hindu and Buddhist belief systems. The Khmer were great builders, having constructed monumental temples, huge reservoirs and canals. They also arranged road networks with all sorts of bridges. Many of these sites still remain today and are popular tourist locations. In 1994, after further archaeological investigation in the Angkor area, it was theorized that the Angkor's end may have been due to deforestation and other overuse of the land, which increased flooding and siltation. Although some say that weather conditions is what caused the fall of the kingdom, others say that it was because the Thai people began to migrate to the south and built their own kingdoms. Eventually, the Thai kingdom of Ayutthaya took Angkor in 1431, which ended the rule of the Khmer Empire. Many theories have been suggested, but no one really knows for sure how this great kingdom came to an end. Number 1. Aksumite. The Aksumite Empire stretched across most of present-day Eritrea, northern Ethiopia, western Yemen, southern Saudi Arabia, and Sudan, and was arguably as advanced as the Western European societies of the time. The capital city of the empire was Aksum, now in northern Ethiopia. Many scholars used to think that Aksum was founded by Semitic-speaking Sabians who crossed the Red Sea from South Arabia, but today most scholars agree that they were indigenous civilization. Aksum established a civilization and empire between the 4th and 5th centuries. The kingdom of Aksum is notable for numerous achievements, such as developing Africa's only indigenous written script, Ge'ez. They were a major naval and trading power, and traded with Roman traders as well as with Egyptian and Persian merchants, exporting ivory, tortoise shell, gold, and emeralds, and importing silk and spices. They were very much involved in agriculture as the land was fertile, and their main exports consisted of crops like barley and wheat. The people of Aksum also raised cattle, sheep, and camels. The empire was rich with gold and iron deposits, and salt was an abundant and widely traded mineral. With an international reputation, abundant resources, and power, it is hard to believe that such an affluent civilization went extinct. Historians have come to the conclusion that in the 7th century the Aksumites were forced to go farther inland in the highlands due to climatic changes, which eventually contributed to the demise of the Aksumites.